Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has gone on record saying perhaps it's time to gather all of our province's premiers and discuss reopening the Constitution. Our country has not engaged in formal constitutional negotiations in 33 years, when the then Prime Minister Brian Mulroney met with premiers to try and amend the Constitution to gain Quebec's support, along with addressing other national unity issues. The News Forum's Western Canada Bureau Chief Hal Roberts chatted with historian, documentary filmmaker, and National Post columnist John Robson to find out why it may be time to reopen the Canadian Constitution.
So, John, what are your thoughts on Alberta Premier Danielle Smith wanting to reopen the Constitution? Do you feel maybe it's a bigger part of a plan towards a potential Alberta separation?
I don't think that Premier Smith is looking to separate Alberta from Canada, but I think she understands that the province needs to get a better deal, and it's unlikely to get a better deal unless there are sticks as well as carrots. So I think she's dramatizing that the rest of the country has to do something significant to improve the deal that the West is getting generally and that Alberta is getting in particular.
Now, why didn't Quebec sign the Charlottetown Accord, speaking of reopening the Constitution back in 92? I mean, it proposed recognizing Quebec as a distinct society, which many argue they are.
I suppose one might say that it's because Quebec separatists say no to everything. But also, and this I think is critical where we are today as well, is that the Charlottetown Accord was not a coherent proposal. It certainly wasn't a constitution that had evolved organically like the one that we inherited from Britain. It was a kind of odd wish list. And I think there was a lot of concern, legitimately, that the various bits and pieces of it would not work together. Constitution making is a tricky business because it tends, like political deal making generally, to wind up with the loudest people getting their pet peeves incorporated. But constitutions have to be organic wholes, or they just don't work at all. And so in Canada, where we seem to be allergic to philosophical thinking, it's very hard for us. We don't habitually go back to first principles, and we don't respect our history. We don't look at the things that our Constitution does because they've worked for 600 or 700 years. We chase the latest shiny thing, and the latest shiny thing is often a lure.
Now, the Beach Lake Accord back in 1990 failed, and the Charlottetown Accord was an effort to maybe address Quebec's concerns, was it not?
Well, I think it was an effort, but again, it's a line from Captain Blood, to describe the purpose for which something was put there, not the function it actually performed. And again, to look at the United States, after the American Revolution, the American founding fathers had a very specific intention, which people don't always appreciate. They wanted to take the inherited British Constitution, which they revered, and put it on a more solid footing. They were not looking to break with the past. They were looking to fix certain structural weaknesses that tended to lead to excessive power accumulating in the executive branch. And that's what we have to be, the kind of way we have to be thinking. We can't think, what's Quebec having a fit about today? That's no way to make a constitution, especially since it may not be something that concerns the rest of the country. But again, it has to be something that fits fundamental justice, where the parts of the thing work together coherently. And I did a documentary on fixing Canada's constitution back in 2016 that triggered an immediate groundswell of lack of interest. But people should go and look at it. It's on my website. It's free. And because I took what we had been given by our past and tried to remedy some of the defects without throwing the whole structure out of line. And if you watch our politicians today gathering to talk Constitution, there's a very grave danger that that's exactly the approach they won't take.
Now, John, one of the key issues for the Charlottetown Accord looking back was Senate reform, transforming the Senate into an elected body, guaranteeing equal representation for each province. Now, wouldn't all parties be on board with something like that?
No, the provinces that are overrepresented would be bitterly opposed. But again, in my constitution, what I did is I looked at the Australian model, which is actually a very good one, which nobody in Canada, I think, knows anything about because, again, we don't think from first principles. They do have equal representation for their states, but they also have a mechanism for resolving deadlocks between the Senate and the House. And it works like this. If they really can't agree on a bill, then you have a so-called double dissolution. Both houses are dissolved. There are fresh elections. If they still can't agree, they sit as one body and vote one representative, one vote. And that's never had to happen because everybody can do the math. But that's a way of keeping primacy, especially on money bills, in the lower house while having a Senate that works. And I also think we could consider going back to the older American system where senators were elected by provincial, or in their case, state legislatures, not directly. But it has to be something closer to rep by pop. And one good way to do that, which I also suggested, was splitting up the bigger provinces. Our federal system would work a lot better if we had more like 24 or 25 provinces instead of the small number we have and the imbalances. So I want to split Ontario and Quebec into 5 and British Columbia into 3 and so on. And all of this stuff is philosophically sound. It's interesting. It's bold. And you try getting people in power in Canada to do something that's any of those, let alone all 3, and they look at you like you've got 3 heads. But we really ought to think to ourselves, if we were starting from scratch, how would we do it? And why don't we do it that way? Including either whether the Senate's elected by popular vote or by the legislatures, which would really give the provinces input at the federal level. Why don't we have more provinces? What has Northern Ontario to do with the Golden Horseshoe, really? Aren't its interests more aligned with those of Northern Alberta and Northern Quebec? And again, I'd split Manitoba and Saskatchewan in 2. I'd even split Newfoundland and Labrador. And then we've got a lot of provinces in much more interesting regional dynamics. But instead, it's like, no, it's never been done that way, so we can't do it that way. And we have to make changes that change nothing. And we must never, ever think in terms of fundamental principles. And so every constitutional reform attempt winds up a nasty shipwreck.
Well, here in Alberta, you got half Oilers fans, half Flames fans, so maybe we should split into 2 provinces there as well.
Exactly. That's where you do it.
Historian, documentary filmmaker, and National Post columnist John Robson, thanks so much for your time today.
My pleasure.